Nathaniel Cross had everything money could buy and almost nothing money could give. At 30 years old, he was one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country. His company built software that ran in half the hospitals and banks in America. His mansion, Ridgemont Estate, sat on 40 acres outside the city, with marble floors so clean they looked like glass and a kitchen bigger than most people's homes. Magazines called him the Golden Bachelor. Reporters loved to guess who he might marry someday. But at night, when the staff went home and the lights in the big house switched off one by one, Nathaniel sat alone in his study with a glass of water he never drank, staring at nothing. He had not always been rich. He grew up in a small apartment with his mother, who worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table after his father left. When Nathaniel was 7, his mother got sick. Cancer. She fought it for 2 years, and he remembered sitting by her hospital bed, holding her hand, promising her he would be someone one day. She died before he turned 10. After that, he bounced between foster homes until he aged out at 18, with nothing but a battered backpack and a fierce, burning need to never feel powerless again. He built his company from a laptop in a shared apartment. 10 years later, he had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. But somewhere along the way, he had forgotten how to let anyone close. Success had filled his bank account and emptied almost everything else. That was where Elena Ramirez came in. Elena had been cleaning Ridgemont Estate for 8 months. She was 28, quiet, and worked harder than anyone Nathaniel had ever employed. She showed up early, left late, and never complained, even when the housekeeping manager piled extra tasks on her. What Nathaniel didn't know at first, what he learned slowly, in small pieces, was that Elena was a widow. Her husband, David, had died in a construction accident 14 months earlier when a scaffold gave way on a job site. He left behind Elena and their daughter, Mia, who had just turned 2 at the time. The insurance from his job barely covered the funeral. Elena took the housekeeping job at Ridgemont because it paid well, and, on the days she couldn't find a sitter, her supervisor quietly allowed her to bring Mia along, as long as the little girl stayed out of the way. That was how Nathaniel first met Mia. She was 3 years old now, with dark curly hair, gap-toothed smile, and a stuffed rabbit named Pip that went everywhere with her. The first time Nathaniel saw her, she was sitting cross-legged in the hallway outside his study, drawing on the back of a discarded memo with a crayon she'd found somewhere. He had opened his mouth to say something about mess and mansions and important documents, and then she looked up at him with enormous brown eyes and said, "I made you a son, because your house doesn't have windows in the middle." He didn't know what to say to that. He simply took the drawing, said thank you, and walked away. But he kept it. It sat in his desk drawer for a week before he moved it to a drawer he never opened for anyone else. After that, Mia became a small, strange comfort in his big, empty house. She left him things: a smooth rock from the garden, a dandelion, a folded paper airplane that never flew straight. She called him Mr. Nate because she couldn't say Nathaniel, and she asked him questions no adult would dare ask, like why he always ate dinner by himself, and whether billionaires got scared of the dark too. Elena tried to keep her daughter out of his way, embarrassed, always apologizing. "I'm so sorry, sir. She doesn't understand boundaries yet." Nathaniel always waved it off. Truthfully, Mia's visits were the only part of his day he looked forward to. But there was something Nathaniel began to notice, something that tugged at him in a way he couldn't explain. Every afternoon, around 4 o'clock, Mia would slip away. At first, he barely registered it. Elena would be folding laundry or vacuuming a hallway, and Mia would wander off toward the back gardens, toward the old stone path near the greenhouse that the current groundskeepers rarely used. She'd be gone for 15, 20 minutes. Then she'd come back, quiet, a little sad-eyed, and climb back into whatever corner her mother had set up for her with coloring books and snacks. Nathaniel asked Elena about it once, casually, over the kitchen island. "Does she wander off a lot?" Elena's hands paused over the folded towel. Something flickered across her face. Worry, maybe, or grief she was trying to hold in. "She just needs a little quiet time," she said. "I let her have it. It's not far. I can see the path from the window." There was something in the way she said it. Too careful, too rehearsed, that made Nathaniel's chest tighten. He didn't push. But that night, lying awake in his enormous, silent bedroom, he found himself thinking about a 3-year-old girl walking alone down a garden path every single afternoon, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening there that no one was supposed to see. He told himself it was none of his business. He told himself that for 3 more days. Then, on a gray Thursday afternoon, when Elena was busy upstairs and Mia slipped out through the side door with Pip tucked under her arm, Nathaniel set down his coffee and quietly, without really deciding to, he followed her. He kept his distance, staying far enough back that his shoes wouldn't crunch too loudly on the gravel. It felt strange, almost shameful, a grown man sneaking behind a toddler like some kind of spy. But something in him, some old, aching part that remembered being small and scared and unseen, wouldn't let him turn around. Mia walked with a funny, wobbling determination only small children have, her rabbit swinging from one hand, humming a tune he didn't recognize. She passed the rose bushes, past the old fountain that hadn't worked in years, and headed toward the greenhouse at the far edge of the property, a glass building Nathaniel hadn't set foot in since he bought the estate. It had come with the house, left over from the previous owners, full of dusty pots and overgrown vines nobody had bothered to clear out. Nathaniel paused at a distance, ducking behind a hedge, feeling both ridiculous and strangely alert, the way he used to feel as a boy hiding from bigger foster kids who wanted to take his things. Mia didn't go inside the greenhouse. She circled around the back of it, to a small patch of grass shaded by an old oak tree, mostly hidden from the main house by a low stone wall. Nathaniel had walked this property 100 times and never once noticed this spot. It was small, private, forgotten, exactly the kind of place a child might choose because no one else ever came there. He watched her kneel down in the grass. His heart was already beating strangely, a mix of curiosity and a growing, unnamed dread. He thought about his own mother, about the year after she died when he used to sit in the stairwell of whatever foster home he was staying in and talk to her out loud, quietly, so no one would hear and think he was strange. He hadn't thought about that in years. Watching this little girl kneel in the grass by herself brought it back, so sharply it almost hurt to breathe. He should turn around, he told himself. This was her private moment. He had no right to be here. But his feet didn't move. Mia set Pip down carefully beside her, like she was making sure he had a good view of something. Then she reached into the little pocket of her dress and pulled out something small. Nathaniel couldn't quite see what from where he stood, and placed it gently on the ground in front of her, the way someone might set a plate at a table. She started to talk. Her voice was soft, carrying just far enough on the quiet afternoon air for Nathaniel to hear fragments of it, though not every word. He crept a few careful steps closer, staying low behind the wall, feeling his pulse hammering in his ears. "And Mommy said I did really good today," Mia was saying, in the particular sing-song voice small children use when they're recounting their whole day to someone. "I didn't cry when she brushed my hair. Mr. Nate gave me juice. He has a big house, but it's kind of lonely, I think. I told him that, but he didn't say anything." Nathaniel's chest tightened. She kept going, rearranging something in the grass in front of her, her small hands careful and deliberate. "I saved you a cookie," she said. "It's the good kind with the chocolate. I didn't eat it even though I wanted to. Mommy says you like the chocolate ones best." Nathaniel's breath caught in his throat. He still could not fully see what she was kneeling in front of. He shifted, just slightly, careful not to make a sound, until the angle changed enough that he finally could. It was a small wooden picture frame, half hidden in the grass, propped up against a rock so it wouldn't fall. Inside it was a photograph of a man in his early 30s, broad-shouldered, smiling, wearing a hard hat and a reflective work vest, one arm slung around Elena, the other holding a much smaller Mia against his chest. Around the frame, scattered in the grass, were small treasures, a few wildflowers, gone brittle and dry from sitting too long in the sun, a smooth painted rock that said Daddy in a child's uneven handwriting, and beside it, wrapped carefully in a paper napkin, a single chocolate chip cookie. Nathaniel stood frozen behind the low stone wall, his hand pressed flat against the cool, Rough stone. Unable to move. Unable to look away. Mia kept talking to the photograph as if the man inside it could hear every word. "When are you coming home from work, Daddy?" she asked, tilting her head the way children do when they're waiting for an answer that never comes. "Mommy said it's a really long job. I miss you so much. Pip misses you too. He doesn't like sleeping without you checking under the bed for monsters." She paused, and in that pause, Nathaniel heard something in her small voice crack, just slightly, the way a much older, much more tired voice might crack. "I'll wait for you," she said. "I always wait for you." Nathaniel Cross, 30 years old, worth more money than entire small countries, stood behind a garden wall and felt his eyes burn with tears he hadn't let himself cry in 20 years. He didn't remember walking back to the house. One moment he was standing frozen behind the stone wall, watching a 3-year-old girl talk to a photograph of her dead father as if he were simply away on a long trip. The next, he was in his study, sitting behind his enormous desk, staring at his own hands like he'd never seen them before. David Ramirez was dead. Nathaniel understood that now, understood it in a way that made his stomach twist. And somehow, in the 14 months since, no one had told Mia the truth. Not really. Not in words a 3-year-old could hold on to and understand. He wasn't angry at Elena. God, no. He understood it more than most people ever could. When his own mother died, the well-meaning adults around him had said things like, "She's sleeping now and she's in a better place." Soft words meant to cushion a blow too big for a child's heart. It hadn't worked for him either. For months after her funeral, he used to leave a chair empty at the dinner table, certain that if he just waited long enough, she'd walk back through the door. Grief doesn't wait for children to grow into it. It arrives exactly when it arrives, whether you're 30 or 3. He sat there for a long time, turning the picture in his mind over and over. The little painted rock that said Daddy, the wildflowers gone dry in the sun, the cookie carefully wrapped and left uneaten. A little girl saving her favorite treat for a father who was never coming to eat it. A little girl telling her mother's boss, a stranger in a big house, that his home seemed lonely and somehow being exactly right. He thought of Elena, working double shifts, carrying a grief of her own so heavy she likely hadn't found the words yet to help her daughter carry hers. He thought about how tired she always looked, how she never once asked for anything extra, how she thanked him for the smallest kindnesses like they were enormous gifts. Nathaniel picked up his phone and called his head of HR, a woman named Patricia, who had worked for him since his company was for people crammed into an office above a laundromat. "I need you to do something for me," he said. Quietly. "Pull the personnel file for Elena Ramirez in housekeeping. I just want to understand her situation better. Nothing invasive. Just, I want to know how to help her properly if she needs it." Patricia, used to his sudden requests, didn't ask questions beyond. Understood. "Give me an hour." While he waited, Nathaniel walked to the drawer in his desk where he kept the sun drawing Mia had made him weeks ago. He unfolded it carefully and looked at it again, a bright yellow circle with lopsided rays, scribbled in a hurry by small, careless, joyful hands. "Because your house doesn't have windows in the middle." He wondered, not for the first time, how a child who had lost so much still had so much light left to give away. When Patricia called back, her voice was gentler than usual. "It's a hard story," she said. Her husband died in a workplace accident about 14 months ago. Construction site collapse. Company he worked for settled quietly, but the payout barely covered funeral costs and the medical bills from before he passed. She was renting a 1-bedroom apartment on the east side, but the rent's gone up twice since then. She's behind on it. She's been picking up every extra shift we offer. Financially, she's barely keeping her head above water, Nathaniel. I don't think she's told anyone here how bad it actually is. She doesn't want pity. Nathaniel closed his eyes. "There's something else," Patricia added carefully. "According to the emergency contact form, there's no other family listed. No grandparents, no siblings nearby. It's just the two of them. Just the two of them. A widow and a 3-year-old girl who talked to a photograph every afternoon so her father wouldn't feel forgotten." Nathaniel thanked Patricia and hung up, and sat in the silence of his study for a long time, feeling something shift inside his chest, something that had been locked tight since he was 10 years old, standing at his own mother's funeral in a borrowed black suit, promising himself he would never again feel this powerless. He was not powerless now. He had more resources than almost anyone on Earth. And yet he understood, with a clarity that startled him, that the thing this family needed most wasn't a check. Elena hadn't asked for money once in 8 months of working in his house. What she needed, what Mia needed, was something money had never been able to buy for Nathaniel either: to not be alone in the hardest thing that had ever happened to them. He thought about marching straight to Elena and telling her everything he knew, but something stopped him. It wasn't his place to announce that he'd witnessed her daughter's private grief. If he came in too big, too fast, with money and pity, he might embarrass her, might make her feel exposed in the one place she'd found some steadiness. So instead, over the following days, Nathaniel began to help in small, quiet ways. He told the estate manager that Elena's hours were being adjusted, same pay, lighter physical workload, better schedule, so she wouldn't have to rush Mia around so much. He arranged, through Patricia, for the company's health insurance to fully cover Elena and Mia, backdated, no explanation needed beyond policy update. He made sure the kitchen staff kept a plate warm for Elena on nights she worked late, and quietly instructed them to always keep chocolate chip cookies on hand, Mia's favorite, he now knew. He didn't tell Elena what he'd seen. Not yet. But every afternoon, right around 4 o'clock, Nathaniel found himself glancing toward the window that faced the garden path, watching a small girl in a yellow dress disappear behind the greenhouse to keep a promise to her father that grief had not yet let her put down. The following week, Nathaniel found himself unable to concentrate on anything. Board meetings blurred together. Emails went unanswered. His mind kept drifting back to that small patch of grass behind the greenhouse, to a wooden picture frame propped against a rock, to a cookie wrapped carefully in a napkin. He kept thinking about his own mother. He hadn't let himself remember her fully in years, not really. He kept her in a locked box in his mind, the way people do with pain too large to carry around every day. But watching Mia had cracked that box open, and now the memories came pouring back whether he wanted them or not. He remembered being 7 years old, sitting on the edge of his mother's hospital bed while she was still strong enough to sit up, still strong enough to braid his hair back, because he refused to get it cut, and none of the foster families that came later understood why that mattered so much. He remembered her laugh, tired but real, even near the end. He remembered the day she died, how the nurses had been so gentle, how his aunt, who took him in briefly before the foster system, had told him his mother went to be with the angels, how he had spent the next 2 years secretly believing that if he was good enough, quiet enough, patient enough, she would find a way back down. She never did. Eventually he stopped waiting. But he never stopped missing the version of himself who still believed she might. He thought about Mia, kneeling in the grass every afternoon, still waiting, still believing her father was simply away at a very long job. Somebody needed to help her understand, gently, in a way that didn't shatter her. The same way, he now realized with a pang of old grief that nobody had ever quite managed to do for him. But that wasn't his place. Not directly. Elena was her mother. Elena would decide when and how to tell her daughter the truth, in her own time, in her own way. Nathaniel understood that boundary and respected it fiercely. He of all people knew what it felt like to have adults make decisions about your grief without asking you first. What he could do was make sure Elena had the support to get there. What he could do was make sure that when Mia was ready to understand, she wasn't understanding it in poverty and exhaustion, with a mother stretched to breaking point working 2 shifts to keep the lights on. He started spending time near them, not intrusively, just present. He'd find reasons to be in the kitchen when Elena brought Mia in for a snack. He started keeping a small set of building blocks in his study, and when Mia wandered in, which she still did, constantly, ignoring every unspoken rule about a billionaire's private office, he'd sit on the floor with her, not saying much, just building towers that she gleefully knocked down. "You're better at this than you were before," she told him solemnly one afternoon, stacking a blue block on a red one. "You used to build boring towers. Now they're good." "Is that so?" Nathaniel said, fighting a smile. She knocked the tower down with a triumphant shout, then looked up at him with those enormous brown eyes. "Mr. Nate, why do you look sad sometimes? Even when you're smiling?" He hadn't expected the question, and for a moment he didn't know what to say. Nobody had asked him that so plainly in years. Everyone else was too polite, too aware of who he was, too careful with the billionaire's feelings. Only a 3-year-old would just ask. "I lost my mom when I was young," he said finally, surprising himself with his own honesty. "Sometimes I still miss her. That's all." Mia considered this with the grave seriousness only small children can manage. "I miss my daddy too," she said simply, matter-of-factly, reaching for another block. "But he's just at work. He'll come back." Nathaniel's chest ached so badly he had to look away for a moment, blinking hard. "Do you think," he said carefully, gently, testing the ground the way you'd test ice on a pond, "that sometimes, even when someone's far away, we can still feel close to them, like by remembering them or talking to them?" Mia nodded seriously, like this was obvious. "That's what I do," she said. "I go tell him about my day. He can't talk back yet, but Mommy says he hears me anyway. Someday when he's done with his big job, he'll answer." Nathaniel swallowed hard and nodded, not trusting his voice. He didn't correct her. That wasn't his story to rewrite. But that night, he called Patricia again, and this time he asked a different question. "I want to set up a trust," he said. "For a child's education, her whole future, university, whatever she needs, no strings attached, structured, so her mother never has to worry about money for her again. And I want to find a way to help her mother with housing, something dignified, not charity that feels like charity." "For Elena Ramirez," Patricia said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Nathaniel said. "But, Patricia, I need to find the right way to tell her. I don't want her to feel like I've been watching her, or like this is pity. I want her to know this comes from somewhere real." There was a pause on the line. "Nathaniel," Patricia said gently, in the tone of someone who had known him since he was 22 years old and broke, "I've worked for you 8 years. I have never once heard you talk about anyone like this. Whatever this is, I think it's real. Just tell her the truth. Start there." He chose a Tuesday evening, after Elena had finished her shift and Mia had fallen asleep on the small couch in the staff break room, Pip tucked under her chin, chocolate crumbs still on her cheek from the cookies she'd been allowed, for once, to actually eat herself. Nathaniel found Elena gathering her things quietly, trying not to wake her daughter, moving with the careful, practiced exhaustion of someone who had been doing this alone for over a year. "Elena," he said softly, and she startled, straightening quickly, smoothing her apron in that instinctive way people do around employers, bracing for bad news. "Mr. Cross, I'm sorry, is something wrong? I can stay later if—" "No," he said quickly. "No, nothing's wrong. Please sit down. I need to tell you something, and I need you to know I mean no disrespect by it." Elena sat, wary, glancing at her sleeping daughter. Nathaniel took a breath. "Last Thursday," he said, "I followed Mia to the garden, behind the greenhouse." He watched Elena's face go pale, her hand rising instinctively to her mouth. "I know I shouldn't have. I know it wasn't my place. But something about her afternoons kept troubling me, and I was worried, and I followed her before I really thought it through. I saw the photograph. I heard what she said to it." Elena's eyes filled instantly with tears, and she pressed her hand hard against her lips, a sound catching in her throat. "I'm not telling you this to embarrass you," Nathaniel said quickly, gently. "I'm telling you because I understand more than you might think. My mother died when I was 7. Nobody explained it to me the right way, and I spent 2 years waiting for her to come back. I sat an empty chair at dinner for her. I know what your daughter is carrying, Elena. And I am so sorry that you've had to carry your own grief while trying to figure out how to help her carry hers, all while working yourself to exhaustion just to keep a roof over both your heads." Elena was crying freely now, silent tears, her shoulders shaking slightly. "I didn't know how to tell her," she whispered. "She was so little when David died. I kept thinking, next month, when she's a little older, I'll find the right words. And then next month came, and I still didn't have them. I'm so tired, Mr. Cross. I'm so tired all the time, and I still don't have the right words." You don't have to have all the answers tonight, Nathaniel said. And you don't have to do this alone anymore, either. Not the grief, and not the exhaustion of trying to survive it by yourself. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it gently across the table, not toward her hands, but close enough that she could choose to take it. This isn't charity. This is a trust for Mia's future, education, whatever she needs, for the rest of her life, structured so it's hers no matter what happens to anyone else. And I've asked my property manager to help you find a real home, somewhere stable, at a rent you can actually manage on one income, close enough that Mia can still see the gardens here whenever she wants. Elena stared at the envelope like it might disappear if she touched it. I can't accept this. I don't even know how to. You can, Nathaniel said gently. Not because you need saving, Elena. You've done an extraordinary job keeping your daughter fed, loved, and safe through the hardest year of your life on your own, with almost no help. That's not weakness. That's strength most people never have to find in themselves. I'm not offering this because I pity you. I'm offering it because your daughter reminded me what it feels like to have someone in your corner, and I want to be that for both of you if you'll let me. Elena finally reached out and picked up the envelope with trembling hands, tears streaming freely now. Nathaniel glanced toward the couch, where Mia was beginning to stir, rubbing her eyes sleepily. There's one more thing, he said quietly. I'd like your permission, only if you agree, to help her have somewhere real to remember her father. A proper garden, not hidden behind a greenhouse where no one else can share it with her. Somewhere she can visit whenever she wants, where she doesn't have to keep her grief a secret. Elena looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her face, surprise, relief, and something warmer underneath both. You do that? For a girl who isn't even yours? Nathaniel thought of the little girl who had drawn him a son because his house had no windows in the middle. She already feels like she's part of something to me, he said honestly. I'd like to earn the right to be part of something to her, too. Mia sat up on the couch, blinking sleepily, spotting Nathaniel across the room. Mr. Nate, she mumbled happily, still half asleep, holding her arms up the way small children do when they want to be carried. Without thinking, without hesitating, Nathaniel crossed the room and scooped her up gently, and she settled against his shoulder like she'd done it 100 times before, Pip squished between them. Over her small dark head, he met Elena's eyes, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked less like someone drowning and more like someone finally, cautiously, allowing herself to hope. The little memorial garden behind the greenhouse had been transformed, not hidden anymore, but tended properly now, with a stone bench, a small engraved plaque with David Ramirez's name and the words beloved husband, father, and friend, and flower beds that Mia helped plant herself every spring, her small hands covered in dirt, Nathaniel kneeling beside her showing her how deep to dig. Elena and Mia had moved into a bright, comfortable house not far from the estate, modest by Nathaniel's standards, but warm, filled with sunlight, with a small backyard where Mia could run without anyone worrying about traffic. Elena still worked, though not out of desperate necessity anymore. She had taken on a role managing the household staff at Ridgemont, a job she was genuinely good at, one that let her come home every evening in time for dinner with her daughter. Nathaniel had changed too, in ways his board members and old friends noticed, but couldn't quite name. He left the office earlier now. He smiled more actual smiles, not the practiced kind for cameras. He had learned, slowly, patiently, what it meant to build something besides a company, to build a family, piece by piece, the way you'd build a garden, with patience and care, and a willingness to get your hands dirty. He and Elena had grown close over that year, carefully, honestly, not rushed, not performative, built on the kind of trust that comes from someone showing up again and again in the small moments, not just the large ones. It wasn't the kind of romance that made headlines. It was quieter than that, steadier, built on shared dinners and shared grief, and the particular tenderness of two people who had both learned, the hard way, how quickly everything could be taken away. Mia, now 4, had grown too, in the way children do, taller, chattier, endlessly curious, still carrying Pip everywhere though his fur was significantly more love-worn than before. She understood now. In the gentle, age-appropriate way Elena had finally found the words for, with Nathaniel's quiet support beside her, that her father was not coming home from a long job, that he had died, and that dying meant he couldn't come back, but that loving him and remembering him and talking to him in the garden was still something beautiful she could always do, for as long as she wanted. She still visited the memorial garden. But now she didn't go alone. On a warm Saturday afternoon, exactly 1 year after Nathaniel had first followed a small girl down a garden path, the three of them sat together on the stone bench beside David's plaque. Elena, Mia between them, and Nathaniel, who had, without quite realizing when it happened, become something like family. "Tell Daddy about your day," Elena said softly, brushing Mia's hair back from her face. Mia knelt in the grass, setting a fresh flower down beside the plaque, the way she always did. "I learned to write my whole name today," she announced proudly to the stone. "And Papa Nate, he said he's really proud of me. And Mommy's really happy now, Daddy. She doesn't look so tired anymore. I think you'd like him. He builds really good block towers now." Nathaniel felt his throat tighten, the way it always did in this small, sacred patch of grass. He reached over and squeezed Elena's hand gently, and she squeezed back, both of them watching the little girl who had, without ever meaning to, taught a lonely billionaire what his whole fortune had never been able to buy him: a reason to come home, and someone waiting there when he did. Red Heart.